citizenship has been settled law for over a century, which of course means Congress and the courts are about to pick up this fight again. Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, the podcast where we go past the headline, past the talking points, and straight into the fine print of the U.S. legislation. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephen, and today we're tackling a topic that somehow manages to be very old, very constitutional, and very 2026 all at the same time.
Oh yes, we are talking about birthright citizenship, which feels like one of those things that's just always been there, like the Constitution, baseball, or arguing about immigration at Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. Or like assuming the Supreme Court won't weigh in on something hugely consequential right before summer recess.
Bold assumptions here in the US.
Indeed.
So before we jump off here, let's take our magnifying glass over there to the UK and talk about UK birthright citizenship.
Okay, well, we'll talk about this a little bit later when we look at the international context of this. But we haven't had birthright citizenship for a long time, many decades, and most countries don't. And this is obviously one of the major talking points about it, particularly on the Republican side of the argument. But so for us, it's a bit weird that it would be such a big fight, because the idea that somebody could come to your country, have a child, and that child will automatically be a citizen is just a little bit weird, and it just seems a bit strange, really. So if you want to be a citizen in Britain, then you need, just the same as in most other countries, you need at least one parent who is also a citizen of that country. And there's obviously various other ways to become a citizen as well, really. You can obviously marry into it, or be a refugee, an asylum seeker, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's always actually been interesting to me because one of my best friends is a British citizen as well as an American, because her mom is from the UK. And I just always was like, how do you have both of them? You weren't born there. And so it's just funny things that feel normal when you grow up in some area, and then things that are not normal because you grow up in a different area. And I gotta say, right now I'm very jealous of her and her British mom, and my mom from St. Louis is not doing as much with the passport trading that I would like her to do. So
yeah, well, I mean, over here we have a similar situation, except it's generally Ireland. So there are lots of people, obviously, in the UK who have Irish parents, Irish descendants, Irish grandparents, and that kind of thing. So when Brexit happened, and all of a sudden we were effectively barred from living and working around Europe, which obviously for those of us who weren't in favour was an absolute tragedy. Everybody suddenly started digging out all of those old family trees and saying, "Oh, I wonder if I can find any Irish parents anywhere," and applying for Irish passports. And so there's a spike in people applying for Irish passports, and obviously Ireland has its rules. It's not that easy to become an Irish citizen, but if you do have some kind of relative or whatever, then you can try that out. So people are very smug if they manage to get themselves an Irish passport and say, "Ha, so I'm European as well as British."
Oh. It's interesting how we all try to play these games. Well, let's get into today's episode. So we're digging into HR 569, the Birthright Citizenship Act of 2025, which has been sitting quietly in the House Judiciary Committee, but may not stay quiet for much longer.
That's right, especially with President Trump's executive order, a Supreme Court case on deck, and immigration back at the top of the political temperature chart.
Yes, and as always, we're using Bill Track 50 to follow this bill, track its progress, and connect it to what's happening across Congress, the courts, and the states, because context matters, people. All right, so let's start with the basics. Birthright citizenship feels obvious to most Americans, like I just said. If you're born here, you are a citizen, you get to be here. But that's actually a very specific legal choice that we've made. It's not just the vibe.
Exactly. And again, Americans tend to think that this is like some inalienable right. It's like the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or whatever.
We have very few ones over here, okay? We need to hang on to what we got.
Yeah. It's true, but you see these kind of things and say this should be a right. Well, it's just not everywhere, and it hasn't been in the US for that long, actually. Modern birthright citizenship comes from the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment. So that's the 14th. That's quite a long way down that list of amendments. And it was ratified in 1868, right after the Civil War. And that timing is everything.
Because that wasn't abstract theory. This was Congress responding to a very real, very ugly Supreme Court decision back then.
Yes, that's right. The notorious Dred Scott v. Sanford
Mm.
decision in 1857. It held that black Americans descended from enslaved people could never be citizens.
Yeah.
The 14th Amendment was designed to make sure that could never happen again, regardless of who was in power.
Well, there's always some gross stuff back in this US history. But that is also where this famous language comes in. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
And that last phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is doing an incredible amount of legal work. It's also the phrase that causes, well, basically all of the modern arguments around this.
Okay, so let's talk about the case that keeps coming up whenever this issue resurfaces, United States v. Wong Kim Ark.
Absolutely. So this one from 1898. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to non-citizen parents, and the Supreme Court held that he was a US citizen at birth under the 14th Amendment.
And that has been doing a lot of hefty lifting ever since.
Absolutely, yes, it is. It is the precedent for saying that anybody who's born in the US, even if their parents aren't Americans, does deserve citizenship. And it's an important nuance. The court has never issued a modern decision that clearly redefines the outer limits of subject to the jurisdiction in today's immigration system. We just have that one case from the 1800s. And that legal gap is why bills like HR 569 just keep coming back.
So this isn't settled law in a way that people sometimes assume it is.
No, no, and you hear this quite a lot in America. Everyone goes, "Oh, it's ridiculous that anyone's challenging this." Of course, the Supreme Court is automatically just going to say that it's fine, the birthright citizenship is fine, but it's not. That's
Mm-hmm.
settled. It's settled-ish, but it's not exhaustively defined. And when something matters this much, that ambiguity can become an invitation to actually trying to overturn it.
All right, so let's get into the bill itself. What does HR 569 actually propose?
Well, HR 569 then amends Section 301 of the Immigration Nationality Act, which governs citizenship at birth. Importantly, the bill says that it acknowledges birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment and then immediately tries to define it more narrowly.
Which is a classic legislative move.
Absolutely, very much so. So, under the bill, a child born in the US would only be considered subject to the jurisdiction and therefore a citizen at birth if at least one parent falls into one of these three categories: a US citizen or national, a lawful permanent resident living in the US, a non-citizen with lawful status performing active service in the US Armed Forces.
That is a very large change.
It's huge, yes. It would deny automatic citizenship to children born to parents who are both undocumented, but also to many children whose parents are lawfully present but temporarily, like students, some workers, or visitors.
And just to calm the internet for a second, this bill is not retroactive.
Correct. It explicitly says it does not affect anybody who is already born. So no one is having their citizenship revoked, even if this bill does become law, which, if you just think through the practicalities of that, it would be pretty impossible anyway. Are you really going to figure out who shouldn't be a citizen and who is and then kick them out? I mean, it just would never work.
Well, we say that now, but let's see what year two of Trump has under its belt.
It's true. That is true. Never say never when it comes to outrageous immigration practices. It's true.
Right, and this bill didn't come out of nowhere. Let's talk about the political context here.
Yes, let's talk about immigration a little. Obviously, it's a really hot button topic, and it has been for some time. It's been one of the most volatile public opinion issues, really, over the past few years. But just looking back over the past couple of years, in 2024, Gallup poll found 55% of Americans wanted immigration to decrease. That's the highest level it had reached in decades.
But by mid 2025, that had flipped dramatically.
Yes, right. So another survey found that only 30% of people wanted immigration decreased, and 79% of people, which is a huge number, said immigration is a good thing. Now, obviously, this is just a poll. It doesn't necessarily reflect all the sentiment, and you have to bear in mind that when people are polled on issues like this, they might not actually say what's really in their mind. They might want to appear to be a good person, whereas actually, when it came down to what they actually think, they might think something different. So it's very, very difficult to poll and get good responses on these. But still, those are quite stark figures, really. That change over just 1 year. And you can look at the sort of super unpopular enforcement tactics that are being used and all of the stuff in the news every single day. I mean, obviously, We've just had that horrendous shooting in Minnesota. So all of that kind of thing is just forcing that pendulum to swing back.
Yes, the US, where the pendulum constantly swings from one direction to the other, and it's impossible to move forward. But this also creates a kind of weird incentive structure for lawmakers.
Yes, exactly. I mean, even when public opinion is divided, symbolically clear policies like redefining birthright citizenship are attractive because they're legible. You can explain them in a soundbite. And when you look at the trouble that the Democrats have had with immigration over years, and they've sort of genuinely had a good faith effort to address the issues of both. Let's be nice to people. Immigrants coming in are human beings. Let's treat them like human beings. But at the same time, we do need to have secure borders. And in trying to actually do those two things, they just got themselves in a hell of a mess, not really achieved either of those aims, and made themselves hugely unpopular into the bargain. It seems to be easier for the Republicans. They have a very simple message that they stick to, which is immigration bad. Let's get them out. And it's just an easier sell in a lot of ways.
Right. The Democrats often get themselves lost and tangled up in the nuance of things. So
They really do. They really do.
Okay, so what do supporters of HR 569 argue?
Well, they frame the current system as a loophole. Representative Brian Babin, the sponsor, argues that automatic citizenship encourages illegal immigration and birth tourism, and that citizenship should reflect a durable legal connection to the country that you're living in.
Right, and this birth citizen topic is kind of a funny one because it's like to the entire issue of immigration. If people wanted to stay in their home countries and maybe we propped those up, then maybe we wouldn't have birth tourism and things like that.
Yep.
But we can't think about those nuances, okay? It's immigration bad. But we also hear the align with the rest of the world argument a lot here too.
Yes, so you've got senators like Lindsey Graham and Katie Britt. They point out that many countries don't offer unconditional just sole citizenship and argue that the US is an outlier. And as we've seen, that's true.
Right, and opponents, unsurprisingly, are not subtle in their objections at all.
No, they're not really. The core argument is a constitutional one, of course. Congress cannot narrow a constitutional guarantee by statute. If the 14th Amendment sets the rule, redefining it legislatively just doesn't work.
And then there's the practical side of all of this.
Yeah, which is a big one. If a child is born in the US but not recognized as a citizen, states still have to decide what documents do they get, what benefits apply, how does it affect schools, healthcare, IDs, and so on. I mean, for me, this is a much weaker argument because you can just say, every other country does it, so just figure it out, right? Put a system in place and then you'll be all right.
Yeah, and states have actually raised those concerns in litigation over Trump's executive orders.
Yes, exactly. And Birthright 50's new executive order tracking tool makes it really easy to see how those arguments are evolving in real time.
All right, so let's zoom out. How unusual is this U.S. approach globally?
Well, the US is one of about 30 countries that offer broad birthright citizenship, mostly, for some reason, I don't really understand, in the Americas. So you've got Canada and Mexico in that group, a few other South American nations as well.
Maybe it's the American dream across the continent.
Yeah.
But many peer countries have moved away from it.
Yes, so as I've already mentioned, the UK ended it decades ago. Ireland amended its constitution in 2004. Germany and New Zealand use conditional systems. So lots and lots of countries like that have sort of moved away from it as immigration has become more of a hot button topic, really. Supporters say that proves reform is reasonable. Opponents, though, I think make quite a strong argument, which is that doesn't matter because those countries are different from the US. The US has this constitution. This idea that anyone can become an American is sort of baked into the national character and the sort of constitutional form of government. It's not just about policies and laws.
Yeah, it's interesting having this discussion because I'm feeling internally that I really do feel like this is something that has, just led to so much of what America is, and just thinking about what America would be as a nation without this is kind of crazy, just part of our DNA. But this really does just come down to one question: can Congress define subject to the jurisdiction thereof?
Yes, and that's the whole ballgame, really. If the Supreme Court reads that phrase broadly, HR 569 is dead on arrival. If the court reads it narrowly, Congress suddenly has room to legislate.
And that brings us to this executive order.
Yes, that's right. So you got President Trump's Executive Order 14160. Look it up on Birthright 50. It directs agencies not to recognize citizenship for certain US born children based on parental status. The courts immediately blocked it, of course, saying that it likely violates the 14th Amendment.
Yes, I remember seeing that in the news. But the Supreme Court agreed to hear Barbara versus Trump.
Yes, that's right. And arguments are expected in the spring of 2026 with a decision by early summer. That ruling will matter more than anything that happens in the House Judiciary Committee.
All right, so we're gearing up for a big year over here. So, where does that leave HR 569?
Well, as a standalone bill, its odds are very, very long, obviously, particularly with all the legal obstacles. But as a signal, it's incredibly important. The Supreme Court's ruling will determine whether this debate can ever happen legislatively or whether it requires a constitutional amendment, which is obviously highly unlikely to ever happen.
All right, well, either way, birthright citizenship and the debate around it is not going away as an issue.
No, no, it's not. It's about law, identity, and politics all rolled into one, which is why it keeps coming back.
Identity politics. But if you want to follow HR 569, the executive order, the court cases related to legislation across the country, Bill Track 50 makes that easy, all in one place, so check it out.
Yes, and if you want balanced summaries of the arguments for and against, we link directly to IssueVoter's analysis from the bill page.
Because understanding legislation means looking beyond the headline and always beyond
the bill number. Oh, we were supposed to do it together then. It didn't work. Never mind.